First the blazing punch bowl, then the torture, culminating in an execution. The destined victim was still closely confined in his dark and dreary dungeon. All the slaves, whether sold or not, had been driven back to the barracks, and the chitoka was clearly of every one except the slave dealers, the havildars, and the soldiers who hoped by favour of the king to have a share of the flaming punch. Alvez did not delay the proceedings. He ordered a huge cauldron, capable of containing more than 20 gallons, to be placed in the centre of the market place. Into this were emptied several casks of highly rectified spirit of a very inferior quality, to which was added a supply of cinnamon and other spices, no ingredient being omitted which was likely to give a pungency to suit the savage palate. The whole royal retinue formed a circle round the king. Fascinated by the sight of the spirit, Moene Loonga came reeling up to the edge of the punch bowl, and seemed ready to plunge himself head foremost into it. Alvez held him back, and at the same time placing a lucifer in his hand. "Set it alight!" cried the slave dealer, grinning silly as he spoke. The king applied the match to the surface of the spirit. The effect was instantaneous. High above the edge of the bowl, the blue flame rose and curled. To give intensity to the process, Alvez had added a sprinkling of salt to the mixture, and this caused the fire to cast upon the faces of all around that lurid glare which is generally associated with apparitions of ghosts and phantoms. Half intoxicated already, the negroes yelled and gesticulated, and joining hands, they performed a fiendish dance around their monarch. Alvez stood and stirred the spirit with an enormous metal ladle, attached to a pole, and as the flames rose yet higher and higher, they seemed to throw a more and more unearthly glamour over the ape-like forms that circled in their wild career. Moene Loonga, in his eagerness, soon seized the ladle from the slave dealer's hands, plunged it deep into the bowl, and bringing it up again full of the blazing punch, raised it to his lips. A horrible shriek brought the dancers to a sudden standstill. By a kind of spontaneous combustion the king had taken fire internally. Though it was a fire that emitted little heat, it was none the less intense and consuming. In an instant one of the ministers in attendance rang to the king's attendants, but he, almost as much alcoholized as his master, caught fire as well, and soon both monarch and minister lay writhing on the ground in unutterable agony. Not a soul was able to lend a helping hand. Alvez and Negoro were at a loss of what to do. The courtiers dared not expose themselves to so terrible a fate. The women of the hall fled in alarm, and Coïmbra, awakened to the conviction of the inflammability of his own condition, had rapidly decamped. To say the truth, it was impossible to do anything. Water would have proved unavailing to quench the pale blue flame that hovered over the prostrate forms, every tissue of which was so thoroughly impregnated with spirit, that combustion, though outwardly extinguished, would continue its work internally. In a few minutes life was extinct, but the bodies continued long afterwards to burn, until upon the spot where they had fallen, a few light ashes, some fragments of the spinal column, some fingers and some toes, covered with a thin layer of stinking soot, were all that remained of the king of Kazonndé and his ill-fated minister. End of Part the Second, Chapter 11. Recording by Alex C. Talander, Davis, California. www.alexctalander.com